Aquaba, greetings. Hello, happy Sunday. Hello, 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 hello. We hope that everybody is doing well. Hope you're reaching your highest level of mental, physical, and spiritual health today on this Sunday. And we are glad that you are here to join us during this month of African Women's Breastfeeding Month and National Women's Breastfeeding Month in this backward cesspool empire country that we live in, the United Snakes of America. But we are here to commemorate and celebrate the act of breastfeeding, which is certainly in a critical part of African culture, a critical part of indigenous culture, and all people on the planet Earth. It is only not a critical part of capitalist culture. So that's why we want to talk about it in a political realm, because we know that everything is political. So we're glad you're joining us for this session today, the radical act of breastfeeding in capitalism. We give honor and respect to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere for their righteous struggle to regain their lands back. All of the Americas belong to them, and they will get their lands back. And we give honor and respect to our African ancestors. All this liberal talk, we are not our ancestors, and nobody's disrespecting our ancestors. We're just saying we're not. There's no way you can spin that where it makes any damn sense. We are everything. If we have any rebelliousness and dignity about us, that's everything to do with us being our ancestors. Like, what is the nonsense? Like, stop the foolishness. We are so happy to descend from the ancestors that we have, our African ancestors, and we are thankful to them. And everything we do, we stand on the example that they have given us. So we start, as we always do, just with our introductions. We have a donation piece. Sorry, we made some changes. Shakur made some changes and caught me off guard. We have donation aspects here. If you want to donate to the All African People's Revolutionary Party, we always ask you to do that. We use your money 100% to support the African Revolution, especially the work that we're doing at home in Africa, which is a lot of work. And so our Ancestors' Voices, this is the 169th episode of Our Ancestors' Voices. It's a program sponsored each Sunday at the same time, same place, by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, the AAPRP. The AAPRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass Pan-African political party that is based in Africa. Our objective is Pan-Africanism, which is defined as one unified socialist Africa. That's our objective. That's what we're fighting for. And our work to achieve Pan-Africanism is outlined in Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, which speaks of the need to unite the revolutionary Pan-Africanist forces on the ground who believe and support the definition of Pan-Africanism as one unified socialist Africa. So that is the work that we are engaged in every single day. And Our Ancestors' Voices, this particular program is sponsored by myself, Ajamu, each week, and Shakura, my biological and ideological daughter. Both of us are members of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, the APRP, and we are organizing for our people's forward progress and liberation. So to get us started on the topic, the radical act of breastfeeding and capitalism, I will turn it over to Shakura.
Thank you so much, Daddy. I appreciate you. And yes, comrades, as my dad said, I'm just going to echo, we actually have several Pan-African Women's Day events that are taking place this month and have already started as of, I think, last week and last weekend. So hence why we are posting this donation link again, whether it's Cash App or Venmo. We are asking for donations because our virtual Pan-African Women's Day event takes place next week on August the 18th. Definitely reach out to abetterworld.me if you are interested in figuring out how to register for that, abetterworld.me. You can also put some comments in the chat and we will definitely try to follow up with you. It's going to be an international broadcast that you don't want to miss. I can tell you that just from hearing the planning committee and how hard they've been working. So I strongly would recommend that you log in and tune in if you can. So with today's conversation, also circulating around Pan-African women and the role that we play in this world, we want to start off by highlighting that first and foremost, when we say the word breastfeeding, we are talking about people who are in a position where they want to give their children human milk. But I think it's also important to say that I want to use interchangeably the word chest feeding with the word breastfeeding, because I also understand that we have comrades who would still like to give their children human milk, but they may not have been born with those particular tools to do such things. And we still understand, first of all, the inclusivity, because it's all about building a stronger Africa so we can have one unified socialist Africa. And so if we're doing that, then that means we need to acknowledge that every person that is working to build up Africa may not be born the same way that I look. But I think as long as we all understand that chest feeding and breastfeeding are acts that can help Africa become free, believe it or not, then we should all work to support that. And so we would naturally start off with the very first slide. And if you are not tuning in to where you can see visually, we of course have to address how patriarchy factors in to chest feeding and breastfeeding rates. And so I would just strongly encourage anyone who understands the value of that to not only give themselves some credit, because that means that they, as a non-lactating person, are understanding that they still have a role to support lactation. But beyond that, I think you all also have a responsibility, and we're counting on you. The lactating people are counting on you to still help to raise more awareness for other non-lactating people so that they too can understand that we need them. It's going to be very, very hard. And there are several studies that I don't even need to cite right now because it's out there. The literature is out there. There are several studies that cite that when African women and African people who choose to give their babies human milk, when they don't have support, it makes it really, really difficult. Very, very difficult. And unfortunately, some of our family members are very confused because they don't understand how patriarchy, sexism, capitalism defers the ability to give a child human milk. They don't understand that formula companies are in Zimbabwe and Kenya right now, working extremely hard. Nestle, for example, is one of those companies working extremely hard to thwart any African woman's choice of breastfeeding, to the point where we don't even want it to be on your mind. We just immediately want you to go to the store and buy our product. So you can't tell me that capitalism is not arranged in this formula. And that's with everything. That's the whole purpose of why we do these seminars every weekend, is to remind you all that we are living in an unjust system. So it's not going to be just because babies deserve to have the best start possible. No, it's going to be unjust for babies, just like the system is going to be unjust for differently abled people, just like it's going to be unjust for African men. It's going to be unjust for African trans people. It's going to be unjust for indigenous people and for Asian people. Every single person, no one benefits from capitalism. If you have listened to any of the seminars by now, that should be the one takeaway that you have taken from that. So yeah, capitalism has ruined the ability to nurse your child without the stress that comes with it. And I can give several examples as we continue with this seminar, but this topic today is centered around the fact that nursing, chest feeding, breastfeeding, these are not actions that marginalized people do and non-male people don't have a responsibility with. You are misunderstood if you believe that. As I said before, and I'll say again, people who want to participate in those actions, they cannot accomplish that without the support of the person whose lives they are in. And a lot of times, if you're in a relationship with a male identifying person, just because they don't have the ability to produce milk doesn't mean that they can't support in numerous ways. We can talk about skin to skin, and maybe my dad will give some tips on that after I'm finished and I turn the floor back over to him. But skin to skin is one of the best ways that a male identifying person can connect with their child. Not to mention the fact that if your partner is in a position to pump their milk, then you can still bottle feed them. So this is not about feeling insecure. This is not about, oh, that's women's stuff, or this is not about, oh, that's for chicks, or whatever terms the toxicity is coming out that you all are using. This is about understanding that our children are under attack. They are under attack from obesity getting to them. They are under attack from allergies getting to them. Our children are under attack from diabetes type 1 I think type 2 is for children, but also type 1 if they don't do what we need to do early in the earlier stages. And they're also under severity of having hypertension, blood pressure issues, all of which can be reduced. All of which can be reduced. I didn't say prevented, because some people don't understand how research works. And when the child still develops something, they'll say, well, you said that's not what I said. I said can be reduced if you participate in the act of giving your child human milk, if you participate in that act. And it's also important to note that, humans, we think we're so much better than animals. And we have all this human supremacy and how we carry ourselves. And this is why we don't watch for squirrels when we're driving. And this is why we don't think about how dogs need to have a place in this world too. We don't have to think about animals and what their needs are. We just think about us as humans and why we need to get to Best Buy to buy our noise canceling headphones. But I will tell you this, for every animal that considers themselves a mammal, they are very clear that their objective is to give their offspring their milk. So why are we the only ones who don't understand what this is all about? And this is also not an opportunity for us to flag people who are not giving their children human milk. We are simply arguing that by choosing to give your child human milk, that is one of the most revolutionary and Pan-Africanist decisions that you can make. So again, we are not dissing those who have not taken that path, but we strongly encourage you, based on the research, based on the evidence, based on the fact that you can literally dismantle systems of oppression by choosing to give your child human milk. It is more deep than you can even imagine. And we're about to jump into it in the next slide. All right, so if we go back a little bit, you all, we have to remember what was the purpose of how cis African women were being treated when they were enslaved. Our objective was to produce as many babies as possible, and we didn't have maternity leave back then. we didn't have the ability to take paternity leave. We literally gave birth to children. I was just talking about this yesterday. We literally gave birth to children probably on a Tuesday morning, and by Tuesday afternoon they expected us to be back in the house cooking or back in the plantation picking cotton. There was no recovery period. There was also no anesthesia. There was no ideologies where we were supposed to have time to bond with our children. It was never about the children. It was about making sure that we could produce children that could be turned into slaves, yes. But it was also about having access to the lactation milk, because then we were in a position to feed the master's children. And so if you've done any research, then you've heard the term wet nursing. That's what that means, where you have African women who are essentially supporting the role of being a, I can't think of the term right now, but almost like a substitute milk provider, for lack of a better term. And there was all this rhetoric about what happened to a person's breast if they were to nurse their children, and European women didn't want to take any chances with that. So it was up to us to do it, because we were servants and we needed to follow based on what they asked us to do. And so a lot of times, we would give milk to their children, then we barely have enough for our own by the time we got back to the slave quarters. And so I just think it's important just to understand the background of what we're really talking about here. I also think that, again, capitalism and imperialism have fed into this notion of what is nursing, what is giving your child human milk, to the tune where it has literally psychologically distorted our brains. And I say that because we have been traumatized in understanding that our resources are not even for our own children because of the trauma that we have been through. So then we find ourselves today where we don't want to provide for our children, and we're not really sure where that's coming from. But that's deeply rooted in us being punished for trying to do it so many years ago. It's deeply rooted in us still providing Europeans with a higher level than us, a higher level of respect than our own people, which is literally what the definition of white supremacy is, where they are more in control and more valuable, so that they need to take all your resources, and therefore you are left with nothing and your children are left with nothing. And so it's important to think about that. It's important to think about how those ideologies have followed us. I've said before, and I'll say again, trauma passes through the placenta. So you have to understand, for the last 500 plus years, our ancestors have been passing on every messed up thing that they have gone through to us. and we have received it. And whether you know you've received it or not, that's something that you'll need to unpack if you were brave enough to do so. But I can tell you right now, it's definitely with me. It is definitely with me, because it's very hard for me to see this photo on the right, where I see this sister literally just exploiting her body for a European child's benefit. And for what? For her to go continue to pick cotton the next day, for her to go get beat by her husband that night, for whatever else things to happen, because the system we live in did not value her. It did not value her. And so we just have to think about, what are our roots? What were we doing before we were enslaved? What were we doing before colonization? We were understanding the importance of nursing our children. We were doing that with joy and with happiness. And we had no problem doing that because we were connected to our culture and we understood that that's what we were supposed to do. That was also before Nestle even got to Kenya. So we didn't even have the influence of formula because it wasn't even a reality. I also remember asking my dad questions about whether or not he remembered if he was nursed as a child. And he said to me, quite frankly, yeah, I asked your moms. And she was like, yeah, of course. What else were we going to do? So again, like when you talk about class, right? So like today in 2023, you can access formula if you are considered what we call low income, right? Especially if you make a certain amount of money every year, then you can sign up for what we call Women, Infant, and Children, a supplemental governmental program. And they will ask you, do you plan to nurse your child? And if you say no, then they set you up with a nutritionist and set up your food package where you can get, oh, but so many cans of formula a month. So yeah, that is an opportunity for you to do that today in 2023. But when formula first hit the market, Africans did not have access to formula. You know why? Because it was targeting rich European families. We couldn't afford it. That's why my grandmother said, yeah, what choice did I have? Because she couldn't afford formula. And if you think about it, the price of formula is still going up and it's still very expensive to this day if you're paying out of pocket for it, which still begs the question, who really is the target audience? Because there's actually more European families that are receiving formula benefits than Africans, but that's neither here nor there, because that's what white supremacy and capitalism does, is it will hide the truth from you. It's up to us to figure out how to go and find it. So I just want us to understand more of what this really looks like and how this has been rooted. Next slide, please. And we'll just continue to ask for you all's donations if you are able. So we have Cash App. We have the $ AAPRP. That's our Cash App name. Venmo is at A-APRP. And our PayPal is at AAPRP. I will repeat those when I get to the next slide, but we just thank you all so much. Again, any money that you can donate is going to our virtual International Pan-African Women's Day broadcast. So if we continue this conversation, then we have to also think about what's going on in terms of how we are thinking about infant feeding practices. And I was highlighting some different things that have tried to push against the system of white supremacy and the system of capitalism. So, for example, developing your birth plan. What is it that you want to do in terms of how you're going to labor your child? This is one way that we can give agency back to African people and to African women, is by asking them, how do you want to bring your child into this world? Do you want to give your child human milk? And if you do, what are some of the ways that you want to go about doing that? How do you want to provide that? Are you interested in getting a breast pump or a chest pump? Are you interested in being able to take your child to work day so that you can still be able to nurse them while you are showing your employer that you're able to produce the work in the same level as if you were not there? Or actually you would produce at a higher level because you're there with your kid than if you weren't there with your child. And so just asking folks what their objectives are and what are their interests in terms of how they can manage these things. Because the bottom line is, the other thing about milk supply is it's Pan-Africanist because we get to decide and determine how much of it we want to give our children. And the more we give it and the longer that we're able to nurse them, the more equipped we are literally coding their systems. So just like if a child is born vaginally, there are films and bacteria that comes out on the baby's skin when the baby comes out and protects their skin from developing jaundice and things like that. If you were born cesarean like I was, then you don't have those same access to those films that I just talked about. But if you were born vaginally, then you are literally coated with these things. So your skin is protected when you come out. But what about internally? Well, that's where the chest milk and the breast milk comes from. It coats the skin internally. So your baby is less likely to get sick. Your baby is less likely to develop allergies. This is what I was just talking about. Your baby is less likely to develop diabetes, less likely to develop asthma. There's actually a correlation where children who were born cesarean are more likely to develop asthma and allergies, and I have both. So clearly, these are some indications that some of this stuff might have some truth to it. But if you were born vaginally, then you're less likely to have issues with your skin, outer skin, dermatitis, all that stuff is less likely to be an issue. But that's what the beauty of the milk does to the baby, is it allows them to be in a better position to control their health. I would say the most important thing that I want to stress before we move to the next slide is when you give your child human milk, you are allowing them the opportunity to communicate with their hypothalamus. And the reason that that's important is because we live in a society where everything we eat is processed. And so because of that, a lot of us we don't communicate anymore with our hypothalamus, the chemical in your brain or the organ in your brain, whatever it is, but we don't communicate with that, which literally means that's telling us it's time to stop eating. And a lot of us don't have any communication with that. So we will continue to eat after our body has already said, hey, I'm full, I don't need any more. We will continue to eat. And why we do it, that's not important. What I need you all to know today is that babies are in a position, if you choose to give them human milk, they're in a position to stay more deeply connected to that communication thread. Because literally, if you give them human milk, they will learn to move their head away when they are done eating. Now, yeah, if you give a child human milk, they're going to eat more frequently. So you need to be prepared for that. A lot of people complain, oh, this baby eating 8 times a day. Well, yeah, they are. You know why? Because when they're first born, in the first couple of days, in the first week of life, their stomach at 1 week is the size of a cherry, I think, if not an almond. It's a very small stomach. So of course they're going to be eating more frequently because they can only fill up so much. Their stomach is literally the size of an almond. And then I think by week 1, it's the size of an egg. Literally, you all. So this is why babies eat so frequently, because they only have but so much to fill up. And if you're giving them human milk, that's a good thing that they're eating frequently, because that means that they are telling you when they are full. That's what we want. We don't want them to overeat, because if they overeat, they are more likely to develop childhood obesity. And we do not want that. A lot of people don't understand when they are nursing their children how the baby knows to stop eating. And I literally said they will give you cues. They will move their head away when they're done. Just like they'll give you cues when they're hungry. They'll lick their lips, right? They'll start staring at your chest, right? There's all kinds of things that they'll do to let you know that they're hungry. But if they are full, they will move their head away. So if you are a new parent, try to pay attention to how your child is communicating with you. Don't force them to keep eating, because that's them telling you, oh, I've checked in with my hypothalamus. I know I'm good for now. I might be hungry in 20 minutes, but for now I'm good. And so we should pay attention to that. Now, if we're giving our children formula, then they're not going to need to eat as frequently, because they are going to get filled much faster. And the other argument I want to make is when you're giving your child formula, you can picture, if you would, a bottle. So a lot of parents who give their child formula and who pump milk, they feel better, I think, because they can literally see the bottle is getting lower and lower, and the liquid in the bottle is going down, which means it's going in the baby's system. So now they feel better because they know, oh, my baby drank this whole bottle. They're doing good. Not necessarily, because if the baby only needed half the bottle and now you have forced them to take the whole bottle, well, this is teaching them to ignore the hypothalamus. So we want to make sure that we are communicating with the child. You listen to your hypothalamus. You don't overeat. Turn your head when you are full. And I'm going to just trust that when you're hungry again, you'll let me know. I will say this, and then I'll move to the next slide. It's also really important for African women and for African people who lactate to trust their bodies. Because the bottom line is your body knows how much milk to make, because your body was carrying this child for 9 months. So just like you and the child communicated when you gave birth to the child will let you know when they're hungry again. And your mammary glands will know to make more milk, because it is already connected and registered. Oh, it's been about 20 minutes. The baby's going to need to eat again. You don't have to do anything as a person. Don't let capitalism confuse you and tell you that you need all this stuff to stimulate your milk. I mean, I guess if you want to buy that, that's fine. But at the end of the day, remember that your ancestors have been doing this for thousands of years. Remember that you were capable of doing this because you deal with capitalism every day and you somehow survive that. So you can figure out a way to communicate with your child to give them the best foundation that you can give them. Are we saying that if you nurse your child, they're less likely to die from being criminalized as an African person? No, there's no guarantee for that. But if we build one unified socialist Africa, we can guarantee that they're less likely to be criminalized. And part of the steps to building one unified socialist Africa is giving our children everything that's already been taken from us, relearning who we used to be, going back to who we used to be, and unlearning the colonization, a formula, if you will, that has convinced us that we don't need to be there for our kids. We can allow some European company to be there for them instead. That is how we are going to prevent criminalization, when we take back our land. And while we're working on taking back our land, let's take back our culture. Let's take back our dignity. Let's take back what we used to do before the Europeans came in and told us what we should start doing. Let's trust ourselves and let's trust our bodies. Let's trust our bodies, because it's quite possible that your body has already communicated what needs to be done. And all you have to do is put that baby on your chest and allow the magic to happen. You might need some support, and everybody's story is different. Sure, of course. Next slide, please. But at the end of the day, we don't even have trust in ourselves anymore. And we're so busy giving the European credit for everything, we don't know how to believe in ourselves. And we don't know how to believe in our biology. And that needs to change. So speaking of, I want to just highlight here, what are all of the benefits of giving your child human milk? And I've talked in some detail about what happens to the child, but I want to also mention how we can think about ways to really ensure that there is a successful latch when it comes to giving your child human milk. Excuse me. So again, you hear so many people say, I'm afraid that my chest will sag, or I'm afraid that it will hurt, or I'm afraid that the baby is going to, I don't know, make me fat, or whatever. People say all kind of things. I've heard everything. I've heard people say, well, I don't want to eat healthy. First of all, you can eat whatever you want to eat. Obviously, it would be best if you made some different decisions, because everything you eat, the child is now eating. But I know a parent who lactates and they go to McDonald's every day, and that's their life and that's their reality, and that's what we do. I also know parents that smoke and they still give their kids human milk. And contrary to what you might think, we still encourage it. We would ask you to change your clothes if you can, so that the child is not taking in secondhand or contact highs, but we would still encourage you to give human milk, because at the end of the day, the coating is still taking place, which is preventing the potentiality of cancers. It's preventing the potentiality of taking in the smoke. It's preventing all of those things, especially if you're able to wash your hands and change your clothes in between smoking and nursing your child. And so definitely reach out if you all have questions. But speaking more about the latch, a lot of times when people say it hurts, it's because they weren't supported in a way to understand how to truly latch the baby on correctly. And when I say latch the baby on, I'm specifically talking about if you are going to put your child to your breast and feed them in that way. If you are doing chest feeding, or if you're doing bottle feeding, then the bottle latch is very different from the nipple latch. So I'm specifically talking about the nipple latch, but you want to make sure that the latch is appropriate and successful. And there's different ways to do it. We also talk about how you want to put the baby on the chest immediately. And I said that before, and I'll say it again, because a lot of times some people force the child to the nipple, and that's kind of what messes up the latch. We want the child to find the nipple themselves, because then they can kind of have some agency and being able to understand what's going on. And again, it's going to require us believing in them. It's going to require us understanding that they are capable. You know how they're capable? Because for 8 months, they've been inside of you. They've been listening to you. They know what you sound like. They know what their other parent sounds like. They've heard their other parent's voice. They know what you smell like. And if they know what you smell like, then that baby knows what their food smells like, and they know where their food is stored. So if you don't believe me, you can watch the videos on YouTube. It is so beautiful to watch these babies crawl on that chest and find that food source. I mean, it is truly miraculous. Capitalism can't take that from us. That is literally biological fight or flight right there, 101. It's such a beautiful thing. And so we would encourage you to put the baby on the chest, because now you all are having the skin to skin interaction. Skin to skin is highly good for endorphins. It's highly good for dopamine, all of these things. I can't even go into it right now, but it's such a good thing. So definitely do that. But it also allows the baby to kind of take on what's happening and what's to come. When babies are first born, they don't have the best eyesight, but their noses are very good. That's why I said you should trust them to be able to find the food source. We also can talk to you about how some people call it the football hold, if you're talking about specific latches. So how you hold a football, but the only difference is instead of the football, maybe in your left hand, that would be the baby's head. And then you would use your right hand to kind of hold their bottom, or vice versa. Some people have also talked about how you can have maybe a more upright position. There's several different ways to do it, but it'll all depend on your comfort, your contouration. I think if I can say that. So how is your body built? How is the baby's body built? Are you sitting up? Are you laying down? There's so many different ways to latch. So you're just gonna have to check out some different things, do your research, follow what your other Pan-Africanists are saying, or if you're in an organization working for justice, check in with them to see, get different information from different people, and just be open to just trying to figure out as much as you can about other ancestors who have done the same thing. I enjoy reading about Sojourner Truth so much when she was on the road, because she talks in great detail about the challenges she faced with nursing her child while she was on the road, trying to give more information about her speech of Ain't I a Woman. And so, we have ancestors who have written about this stuff, you all. So we can look to them and get information from them. We can learn from them. We can understand how they dealt with some of these challenges. And maybe, just maybe, the situation is still the same in 2023. So we can use some pages out of their book, pun intended, to figure out how to navigate through all of these systems of oppression. I also would encourage us to think about the difference between exclusive nursing versus partial nursing. And so when we talk about exclusive nursing, we are talking about fully only exposing the child to your human milk, no other food substance of any kind. And there are different supportive articles that suggest that you can do nursing for up to 2 years, but you can do exclusive feeding for 6 months. And then after 6 months of life, you can still do partial feeding in addition to other food introductions, right? So maybe crackers and other things like that. There are other studies that support that if you do partial feeding, that's not a bad thing. But keep in mind, your milk supply is literally like supply and demands in terms of economics, okay? And so whenever I would go to events, I would always have 2 jars of rice. The first jar would be filled up completely, and the rice is supposed to represent the milk. The second jar had about a fourth of rice inside of it. And I would explain to the parents that would walk up to my table that if you are nursing and pumping and you are meeting your baby as soon as they're hungry, and your baby is with you as soon as they're hungry, and you're latching them on and feeding them, then the more you are feeding them, the more of a demand you are telling your mammary glands that you need, which means your mammary glands are going to produce more milk because it's based on supply and demand. But if you are not nursing as much because your child is across the city and you didn't get to them in time, well, now you're full and you need to express your milk because the baby should have been there to take it off your hands, literally. Or maybe you should have had your pump with you to release it. So if you're not taking advantage of that, then you're not going to be using as many resources. And if you're not using as many resources, then you're going to communicate to your body, I don't need you to make as much milk. So a lot of people will complain and say, oh, my milk supply was messed up. Well, sure, there's so many factors as to why that could be the case. But this is why I'm arguing that if you have a pump with you, to pump as soon as possible so that you can still let your body know, I need this milk. And if you don't have the pump, then maybe you have the baby with you. If you don't have the baby with you, maybe you go to the baby. But there needs to be a way for you to release the milk, because I didn't have time to make a slide, but if you don't release the milk, then we start to have other health issues like engorged breast, which from what I understand is very painful, mastitis, That's where we have infections. Like, these are some serious health issues that can happen when we are not releasing the milk in a timely manner, because it can only hold so much. So that's why we're just trying to think of some different ways to think about what is exclusive versus partial, and what are some of the outcomes that can happen because of that. That's why I was also saying we should continue to nurse on demand as much as we can. And then if you don't have the child with you, then you pump and you keep going, but you still find a way to release that milk so that you're still communicating to your body, I need you to make this. I would also argue that we should think about doing some research on hand expression. Capitalism is not going to talk to you about hand expression, because this is the best way for you to manage your milk supply, is by you expressing the milk yourself. And so we just want to do more research on that. There are many techniques out there, but it's a very simple process where you're literally just communicating with your body and saying, yeah, I want you to give me a certain amount. And some people might hand express and maybe just be able to provide maybe a tablespoon to their child, or maybe a teaspoon amount worth. But that's still enough, because it's still letting the body know, I want you to make more, but this is also some extra steps that I might have to take. For some people, it's no issue. For other people, they might have to do hand expression with stimulation with some other things. And so we try different things. And this is why we do our research, but also why we join an organization that's working for justice. Now, I am very biased because this is my research. I've been doing this since I started my master's program. So clearly I have a lot of information. I also studied to be a lactation consultant, but the average person may not have all of this, but they do have the opportunity to join an organization that's working for justice. And if you are in an organization that's working for justice, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be able to find support within that organization that is working for justice. And if you are finding support within that org that's working for justice, then you might even encounter some other people who have dealt with some of the same things you're going through. Excuse me, or maybe they know people going through some of the same things you're going through, or maybe they've never experienced it in their life, but they want to listen and just provide you with support, because organizers to organizers, we all understand how difficult this work can be. And the best thing we can do for a new parent who is sleep deprived and upset that the baby is not latching on the way they want them to, the best thing we can do is listen and provide support, and maybe even send them some food, or offer to wash the dishes and clean up the house while the baby is napping. We all have our responsibilities, you all. And now we're talking about what socialist environments look like, because it really does take a village to raise a child. Truly, it does. And so we just got to think about that a little bit more. Again, the title for today is how breastfeeding and chest feeding can be revolutionary and radicalizing in terms of resisting systems of oppression. And the best way that we can achieve one unified socialist Africa is by encouraging as many people as possible to do their research if they are pregnant, and what are some ways they're interested in feeding their babies. Because if they consider giving them human milk, there are some extreme benefits, but we need to step up and also support them. And again, we don't need to just support them because we are marginalized communities. We all need to support them, especially men, because everybody benefits when a child receives human milk. Everybody benefits from that child being less likely to be sick. If they're less sick, they're going to miss less school. If they're not missing as much school, then they can take the capitalist American education and then they can flip it and make the world a better place for socialist countries everywhere. We can all get all these higher ed degrees that we're getting, but instead of building America, because no one wants to do that, we can use the information we've received and we can make a difference in our communities back home in Kenya or in Ghana or in parts of the Congo. We can study what water irrigation looks like, and we can try our best to see if we can help Libya help rebuild what Barack Obama bombed and took down. And so we have a responsibility, you all, and I don't want you to think, well, breastfeeding has nothing to do with achieving socialism. It has everything to do with that. It has everything to do with that, because breastfeeding and chest feeding are some of the most humane acts that you can ever do. That is one of the most humane acts that you can ever do. If you give someone formula, you're not seeing them as a person, because you're not allowing the baby to truly be in the most healthiest state that they can be in. And again, I'm not dissing people who have chose to do formula. I get that there are reasons that are unexplainable as to why some people need to do that. But I'm strongly asking you to consider all the options before you allow formula to be the last choice, because there's so much revolutionary things to it. I'm talking biologically, I'm talking mentally, I'm talking physically, but I'm also talking ideologically. There are benefits to giving your child human milk. Ideologically, there are benefits, because this is how they reconnect back to their culture. If we reintroduce formula, then we're just promoting and celebrating the fact that colonization has won once again. And we need to resist that as much as possible. We need to unlearn it. We need to decenter colonization. Aren't you tired of colonization? I am. I don't want it in my life at all. I don't even want colonization in my animal's life. So I gave my dog an African name because I can't stand colonization. So if you understand where I'm coming from, then you too should try to do everything you can to resist it. And again, joining an organization would help with that. And so I'm about to close and move to the last slide, but I just wanted to highlight you all. I don't know if you can see on the right here, but this image was taken from Women, Infant, and Children, that governmental program I told you about. And it's one of my favorites because it shows how we can literally see. If you can't see the Zoom, then I'm just going to describe it for you. So the first column you see is all of the things that can be found in formula. So of course we have water, we have protein, we have carbohydrates, we have fat, we have vitamins, we have minerals, we have probiotics, and then we have something else that I can't see. And then that's it for formula. But that column is also evenly distributed and matched out with the same column next to it that is supposed to represent what you can find in human milk. And so in addition to everything I just said, water, protein, carbohydrates, fat, vitamins, human milk also has anti-parasites. It has anti-allergies, it has antiviruses, it has hormones, it has disease-fighting stem cells, it has enzymes, it has growth factors, it has anti-cancer, and it has antibodies inside of it. All of that comes from each of us as individuals who are carrying these children. Formula can never, ever, ever match that because it's literally a substitute. It is not the best thing. So I just want us to really understand, if we're truly decentering colonization, if we're truly trying to build one unified socialist Africa, then whether we have children or not, this is a conversation that we should try to have as much as possible. If we are marginalized people or not, if we are males or not, this is a conversation that we should be having. And again, I say to you, we think we're so much better than animals, but every mammal out there that is an animal understands that they need to give their children their milk. They are not confused about that at all. So we can talk as much trash as we want about them, but at least they understand that they're doing what they need to do. But humans, we've been confused so much by media and by the art of selling things and by exploiting things and by pushing information down your throat, information that's available 24/7 on social media, on your TV, on your smart TVs, on your ads on social media. It's always there. And it's always there, specifically this rhetoric telling us that we're not enough. It is always there. Next slide, please. So we're going to have to work really hard to ignore that rhetoric. We're going to have to work really hard, you all, because if we allow capitalism to let us in, capitalism will convince us that we don't even need to be parents because we don't need to give our kids human milk. We don't need to achieve one unified socialist Africa, and we should just be content giving our babies formula and staying in Memphis, Tennessee. That is what capitalism will do if we allow it. We have to be stronger and better and wiser and smarter. And we have to know that this is not enough. We have to know that our children deserve better. And again, I say to you, we just saw the benefits biologically. We saw the benefits mentally. But I talked to you also about the benefits ideologically. We should want our children to know who they are. And the best way to do that is to have conversations with them when they get old enough about how you, their parent, how you worked really hard to uncenter colonization. So you gave them an African name, or maybe you didn't do that, but maybe you chose to give them human milk, or maybe you didn't do that, but maybe you intentionally took them back home to Africa, not America, but to Africa, so that they could experience being on African soil. But you have to do something to help uncenter colonization. You have a responsibility to do that. And our children are not going to be able to go if we don't take them. They're not going to be able to understand that formula was not always a way of life if we don't explain that to them. They're not going to know what wet nursing is. They're not going to know that we were literally forced to feed somebody else's kids. They're not going to understand that. That's up to us to teach them that. And the best way we can teach them is by feeding them what we are producing, by giving them those anti-allergies, by giving them the anti-allergies and anti-asthma probiotics. By giving them those things, we can help them. We can help them understand that they have a responsibility to their health. We can help them understand that we work so hard to give them everything they needed so that they could be healthy. Why? Because when we die, we still need them to maintain a one unified socialist Africa. So again, it is not just about us, it's about the next generation managing and massaging what we have worked so hard to do, because it is going to happen. But we need to make sure that once we achieve one unified socialist Africa, that we hold that. We need to make sure we manage that. We need to make sure it does not slip through our fingers, and we need to make sure the colonizers do not get what they are so desperately interested in getting back. Once we take it from them, we need to keep it from them forever. Otherwise, all of this will be for nothing. All of this will be for nothing. And as I said to you before, if we don't achieve one unified socialist Africa, you nursing your child is not going to matter when they're still being criminalized 2 weeks from now. You nursing your child is not going to matter when the police officer intentionally pulls behind them and now pulls them over for absolutely nothing. Meanwhile, you have all these Europeans that have drive-out tags and broken headlights and everything. They don't get pulled over, right? None of this is going to matter when your child is being held back because they are not, quote unquote, paying attention, when really we know that they're being targeted because of some other systemic issues within the public school system. None of that is going to matter if you're nursing your child, because we don't have control of our own land. As African people, we don't have power and we don't have control if we don't have our land. But if we get control of our land, then we can cease our children being criminalized in school systems. We can terminate the school system. We can terminate all the teachers, and we can hire teachers and create a new school system that does what? That values and promotes African ideologies, that values and promotes Pan-Africanism, and that teaches these children who the heck they are, so that they can truly understand what their contribution is. We can teach them how to not be individualistic. Doesn't that excite you? Doesn't that excite you to know that you don't have to raise selfish children? I am so excited to think about that. I am so excited to think about how I can teach my children to be collective. I don't have to teach them to be selfish and individualistic. If I choose to do that, shame on me. That means I'm not in an organization that's working for justice, because clearly if you were, you wouldn't have that approach, because you'd be taught that you need to be thinking about other people. You'd be taught that you need to understand that this world is not just about you. You would be taught that there are people working right now to change the conditions for you, and you don't even know who they are. You would be taught that because you'd be exposed to literature. You'd be exposed to traveling around the world. You'd be meeting other organizations that have been fighting for Africans since before both of us were born. And it would humble you to learn that. But that's all if you join an organization that's working for justice. So we need to do our part, you all. We need to join an organization that's working for justice. Say it with me. Join an organization that is working for justice, because it really is the only way, you all. It really is the only way. I was just having this conversation yesterday with a friend of mine, and they were talking about how they don't really feel like they're doing enough to make the world a better place. And I said, well, I mean, you could join an organization that's working for justice. I think that would give you a lot of what you're looking for. And they're like, yeah, I want to do this and I want to do that, but it's not enough. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't feel that I'm not doing enough. And so I really hope that they maybe take my advice or just consider starting their own organization, which they also spoke of doing. But I definitely sense their emptiness that they had. And I sense it from a lot of you all, because Africans and indigenous people are still being shot down. We're still being criminalized. We're still being followed. We're still being harassed. We're still being abused. All of these things are still happening, even though your president promised it wouldn't happen anymore. And your girl also promised that no more sisters would die from birth. But yet we still have sisters dying. So Serena Williams is pregnant right now, and I am literally having a heart attack because she had so many complications with her first pregnancy. I really hope that things are better for her and her baby this time around. But these things are happening every day, you all. So it doesn't matter who's in office because those are empty lies. You can't prevent somebody from dying from maternal mortality if they live in a system where they don't even matter. How are you going to prevent that? The doctors don't even care to listen to them. That's why I said we have to know our own bodies. We have to know our own bodies. And we have to know to tell the doctors, this is my body and this is what I want to do. It's not going to come out of the sky. We're going to have to learn how to advocate. But if we had one unified socialist Africa, we might actually have some doctors that actually gave a darn and who were actually taught what listening and communication skills look like the doctors in Cuba or like the doctors in another socialist country. And so as I prepare to close and hand the torch back to my dad, you all, you've heard me say it again and we'll say it again. Join an organization that's working for justice so you can build up your political education. All of this stuff that I shared with you today, it's not by accident. It's because I have been diligently reading and trying to understand more about why my African people and their children are suffering so much. I don't have to tell you that our allergy rates and our asthma rates and our diabetes rates and our hypertension rates are some of the highest. That's because a lot of us didn't have that birth start of getting that human milk. We didn't have that foundation. A lot of us are severely obese. That's because we didn't have that birth start, you all, where it was communicated to us that we could listen to our hypothalamus and not overeat if such a thing exists. So we have to think more about that. And I would encourage us to get our passports and to visit as many socialist countries as we can, starting with Cuba. Because from what I remember from my dad and my mom's trip, they have some of the most amazing lactation support systems in the world. And their lactation rates are outstanding and astronomical in a very good way. So I am going to pass it back to my dad, but you all know that you need to start first by joining an organization that's working for justice. And depending on who you are as a person, whether you have children or whether you're a man or whether you're a marginalized person, if you're differently abled, whatever your identities are, we still need you to help us join this fight, which means you still have a responsibility to either speak as much as you can about how revolutionary and radical chest feeding and breastfeeding can be, or we need you to get out of our way because Africa will be free one day. And you can just benefit from all of our hard work if you want, but you're going to have to you're going to have to contribute at some point. So you might as well start to think about what you can do for your organization now, because we're going to expect that of you. Ashe.
Ashe. Ashe. Thank you. Madasi, Obrigada, Shakura. Very informative. And I think everything has been said. I would just add to your question that you asked in the beginning that yes, without question, when you were born, I tried to do everything, your mom and I together, but I tried to do everything I could to be as much a part of the process as I could. And in fact, I will say with complete confidence, your entire life, I've tried to do as much as I could to be as much a part of your growth process as your mom. And I think that as men, that's our responsibility. So that included doing the things you mentioned, the skin to skin contact, did that every day. And the funny story is once when you were a newborn, you probably were about 3 months old. This is in 1987. So we had a waterbed, like a lot of people back in that time. And it was a Saturday and it was just you and I tried for the first time this technique of, having my shirt removed and having you with just a diaper on, lay on my chest, the skin to skin contact. And, Shakura knows this story, but I'm sharing it publicly, probably for the first time. But so I laid down there and I thought, you know, that what I had read, like you do that for a while, and that's considered a healthy way to bond with your child for a man. But I fell asleep. And I fell asleep, and I was out for probably about an hour and a half. And when I woke up, you were not on my chest. Shakur was not on my chest. And I panicked and I didn't want to move because I didn't know where you were. And then you were actually in the crevice of the waterbed between the mattress and the wood frame, and you were fine, of course. But I continued to do the skin to skin, but I just didn't do it on the waterbed, so I wouldn't fall asleep. But yeah, we did all of those things, and we encourage everybody to do them. It's everybody's responsibility. I just don't believe that as a man, if you're an African man and you say you're for the emancipation of African people, that you could subscribe to backward patriarchal views that are really obstacles for women and marginalized people reaching their full potential. So we don't believe in that. We believe that we have to play a critical role in what happens with our children and our family. And on that note, as Shakur has mentioned, we want to again encourage you to make a donation to one of the AAPRP, All African People's Revolutionary Party platforms there. Cash App is there on the screen, Venmo, PayPal. And the reason why we are asking you to do that is because we are organizing Pan-African Women's Day. Pan-African Women's Day is one of our institutions in the All African People's Revolutionary Party. There's going to be a virtual one next weekend. So we have to pay translators. You know, we're not just in the United Snakes of America. We're all over the world, particularly all over the African continent. So we have to pay translators. And so we appreciate any support that you can give. And with that, we thank you for coming. We invite you back next week, August 20th. We're going to be talking about what the Montgomery boat ramp fight should mean. Like, what are the takeaways that we should take from that? A lot of people are expressing inspiration from those Africans standing up against those Klansmen or whatever the hell they were. And so we want to talk deeper, though. We want to give a revolutionary Pan-Africanist analysis. So the actual title is Beyond TikTok, a revolutionary Pan-Africanist perspective on the Montgomery boat ramp fight. So join us next week, spread the word, go to our AAPRP Forward Ever shop and buy some of these conscious raising clothes, hoodies, t-shirts that are designed to advance consciousness around the African Revolution. You can see that there on the screen, the link to do that. So please support us. We don't advance just support Black business. We advance support African organizations, particularly revolutionary organizations that have a history of fighting for our people's emancipation. Pardon me. So please go to the AAPRP Forward Ever shop and support. Join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Go to AAPRP-intl.org and join us. If you don't want to join us, join some other organization working for our people. And if you don't want to do that, start your own. But you cannot escape, as Shakur eloquently articulated, the necessity for us to be organized. And we also invite you to come to abetterworld.me for information about these weekly sessions. Next week will be our 170th episode of Our Ancestors' Voices. So you can go to betterworld.me, look at all the videos. They're all there. hoodcommunist.org. Excellent site for revolutionary African literature. You're not going to get that, obviously, on CNN and CIA, so go there to get it. All these other programs, the APRP sponsors, Pantula, etc., they're over 100 broadcasts themselves. Check them out. They're all wonderful programs. And finally, as always, I'm telling you, please buy and support and tell people about my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. The need and necessity is here for us as people and communities to know how to defend ourselves. And that's what the book is about. All proceeds go towards anti-fascist work that I do. So please support that. I'm talking about frontline anti-fascist work. I'm talking about knocking down Proud Boys. So please support this work. Forward ever, backwards never. We appreciate you. Join us next week. Stay strong. Enjoy the rest of your evening.